What if Ned Stark never took the ship back to Westeros after Robert's rebellion? What if, in a twist of fate and honor, he found himself in the burning heart of Essos, face to face with the last embers of a dying Targaryen legacy? It began with a decision, one he never spoke of in Winterfell, one not even Catelyn truly understood. After the sack of King's Landing, when Tywin Lannister's men paraded the bodies of Rhaegar's children through the Red Keep, and Elia Martell's screams had only just faded from the stone walls, Ned Stark had looked into Robert's eyes and seen something broken, something hungry. Robert had won, yes, but the man he once called brother had been devoured by hatred. Ned knew then if Daenerys and Viserys Targaryen were caught, they would not be spared. No matter how young, no matter how innocent, so he made a silent oath. One last act before returning north. He would find the children and ensure their safety. Or die trying, he never told Robert. He just left. The journey was bitter and long. From Storm's End to Dawn, then across the narrow sea in secret. He posed as a merchant. He shaved his beard. He used the name John Rivers, a merchant from Gulltown. He wore silks he hated, and tasted wine too sweet for his tongue. But he kept going. Essos wasn't like Westeros. It was louder, dirtier, full of life and danger and lies. By the time he reached Pentos, rumors of the Dragonspawn's whereabouts had already changed a dozen times. Some said they were in Lys, others in Myr. But one whispered voice, a Lyseni smuggler with red wine breath, told Ned of a magister named Illyrio Mopatis, a collector of curiosities, and a protector of last names long thought extinct. Ned found him in a palace that reeked of roast duck and perfume, lounging among silk pillows like a man who had never known hardship. Illyrio smiled when Ned introduced himself. A merchant from the Vale, here for spice trade? No, you're not here for spices. You're here for dragons. Ned didn't answer. He didn't need to. That night, Illyrio brought him to a courtyard filled with lemon trees. The sun was dipping below the horizon, and in the orange glow of Essosi dusk, Ned Stark met her. Daenerys Stormborn. She was barely 9 years old, thin, silver-haired, quiet. Her violet eyes watched him like a cat cornered in an alley. Beside her stood Viserys, older, colder, more serpent than boy. He held her hand tightly, but not out of affection. Out of control. Ned saw it in a glance. He bowed his head slightly to her, not to him. Daenerys, Illyrio said, this man once rode with your brother Rhaegar. He's come from far away. Daenerys blinked. Why? Ned kneeled before her against all protocol and said the words that would change everything. To make sure you live. Viserys scoffed. She doesn't need your protection. She has me. We have plans, great ones. You were with Robert, weren't you? You helped murder our family. Ned didn't flinch. He took the accusation like a blow and didn't deny it. Your family fell in war. I tried to save your sister and her children. I failed. Viserys didn't understand. He didn't want to. But Daenerys, she looked into Ned's eyes and saw something more. A sorrow, a weight, a man who carried ghosts with him. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. Illyrio, ever the opportunist, kept them together. He had his reasons. Perhaps he thought Ned's presence would stabilize the boy. Or maybe he liked watching the wolf squirm in Dragonfire. But Ned stayed. Weeks became months. He sent word back to Winterfell, a raven with only one line. I must remain. Tell no one. Maester Luwin would keep it secret. Catelyn would fume, but she would wait. She always did. Viserys despised him, called him a traitor, a dog of the usurper. But Daenerys followed him. She asked questions. About Rhaegar, about Westeros, about snow and wolves and honor. She wanted to know the stories the songs didn't tell. Ned told her everything, slowly, carefully. He didn't romanticize war. He told her Rhaegar was noble but not perfect, that her father was mad, that thousands died screaming for the sins of kings. And Daenerys listened, quietly, like she was memorizing every word. She began calling him Sir Eddard. He never corrected her. He watched her tend to the lemon trees in the courtyard, her bare feet dusted with soil, her hair braided like a girl who still believed in magic. But he also watched her become something else, stronger, smarter. She stopped shrinking in Viserys' shadow. She began to speak up, and Viserys noticed. One night, Ned found Daenerys sitting alone near the water's edge, looking out toward the narrow sea. Will I ever go home? she asked. Ned sat beside her. Home is not always where you were born. She looked at him, her eyes older than they should have been. He says we'll take back the throne. Burn them all. I don't want to burn anyone. Ned closed his eyes. The echo of the Mad King's voice. Burn them all. You don't have to be your father, he whispered, or your brother. Daenerys took his hand, small, cold, but firm. I don't want to be a queen, she said. I want to be free. He didn't smile, but something softened in his eyes. Maybe, just maybe, there was still hope, but peace never lasts in Essos. One evening Viserys tried to strike her. Again. But this time she struck back. Not with fists, with words. You are not a dragon, she said. You are a shadow pretending to be fire. Viserys was humiliated, and like all cowards, he blamed others. That night he fled Illyrio's mansion and vanished into the streets of Pentos. Ned searched, but the city swallowed him whole. Then came the letter, delivered by a Braavosi child with eyes like knives. A ransom note, simple and cruel. 100,000 gold, or the dragon dies screaming. Illyrio wanted to negotiate. Ned didn't. He went alone, sword in hand, in the robes of a merchant, but eyes like winter steel. The warehouse stank of piss and mold. Viserys was tied to a post, gagged and shaking. The captors, 5 in total, Essos Sellswoods with nothing to lose, laughed when they saw the old man arrive. They didn't laugh for long. Ned Stark, even in exile, hadn't forgotten the dance of death. Ice had stayed in Winterfell, but his rage traveled well. He killed 3 before the other 2 ran. He didn't chase them. Viserys sobbed, not out of gratitude, as out of shame. He looked up at Ned, face bloodied, and whispered, Why did you come? Ned looked down at him. Because your sister needs you alive, not loved, not respected. Just alive. He brought him back. Daenerys said nothing when she saw her brother bruised and broken, but her eyes said enough. From that day on, she stayed closer to Ned, Illyrio noticed. She trusts you more than her own blood. Ned didn't respond, but he wondered. Years passed. She grew taller, stronger, wiser. The world still called her princess, but in that mansion in Pentos, among books and lemon trees, she was just a girl, raised by a man who knew only duty. And yet, something stirred. Across the sea, Robert Baratheon sat on his iron throne, haunted by ghosts. Varys whispered of the Silver Queen in exile. Littlefinger smirked and planted seeds of fear. When the Raven arrived in Pentos, sealed with the hand's sigil, Ned knew his time was running out, but he also knew something else. If Daenerys crossed the sea now, she would not come as a pawn. She would come as something far more dangerous, a dragon raised by a wolf. 3 days after the Raven arrived, Daenerys found Ned standing alone in the lemon grove, the letter clutched tight in his hand. His jaw was tense, eyes distant, like he was staring at ghosts again. She didn't speak at first, just stood beside him in silence. The leaves rustled gently above them, and the Essos sun painted golden lines across her silver hair. I know it's from Westeros, she said quietly. He didn't look at her. From the hand of the king. Is it Robert? No, Ned said, finally turning to her. Jon Arryn. That name meant little to her. Just another figure from a world that had tried to erase her. But it meant something to him. His old friend. The only man who had ever kept Robert from destroying himself entirely. What does he want? Ned's fingers curled around the letter. He wants me to return. Robert has begun hunting you. Daenerys blinked. Slowly. So nothing's changed. No, Ned said bitterly. Everything has. Illyrio confirmed it hours later. Whispers from Westeros. Assassins were being paid. Gold flowed like blood from King's Landing. The girl must die. So must the boy. The Targaryen name had to end. Viserys heard the news and reacted as Ned expected. Rage, spitting threats, and talk of fire and blood. But this time Daenerys said nothing. She only looked at Ned. And he saw it, the flicker in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Not fear, not confusion, conviction. They were coming for her. Ned met with Illyrio that night. We have to move them, he said. Now. Illyrio puffed his pipe lazily, as though the conversation didn't concern him at all. Move them where, my lord? You know as well as I do there is no safe place. There is, Ned replied. Braavos. I have connections there. They'll vanish. Live under new names. New names don't stop arrows, Illyrio said. They'll be hunted wherever they go. Then I'll take them to the north, Ned said. Illyrio raised a brow. You would bring a Targaryen into the den of wolves. I would raise her as one. It was madness, and they both knew it. But Ned no longer cared. He had watched her grow. This girl, this would-be queen, wasn't like her father. She wasn't even like her brother. She was something else entirely, but Illyrio had already begun planting seeds elsewhere. Whispers in Qohor, letters to the Dothraki. The merchant lord had plans of his own. And Daenerys, whether she knew it or not, was part of them. The next day she found Ned in the study, pacing. She didn't ask for permission. She simply said, "Teach me to fight." He stopped, stared at her. "No, why not?" "Because it's not who you are." Her voice didn't waver. "It might have to be." He looked at her then, not as a girl, not as Rhaegar's sister, but as someone who was becoming something neither of them could control. He relented. Each morning, she rose before the sun and trained with him in the courtyard. Sword drills, footwork, defense. She wasn't strong, not yet, but she was fast, quick to learn, and quicker to recover. Viserys mocked her at first, until he saw the bruises on her arms and the fire in her eyes. Then he stayed away. Ned said little during the training. He let her learn through silence. Only sometimes between strikes he'd offer a few words. "A sword is not for power. It's for protection. Or you win by surviving, not by killing." But still the world moved without them. One night a hooded man arrived at Illyrio's gates. He wore the red sash of Myrish mercenaries and spoke in low-clipped tones. He had come with gold and with orders. The girl was to die quietly, no spectacle. No fire, no trace. Illyrio smiled and poured him wine. Then had him strangled by dawn. When Daenerys learned of it, she didn't flinch. She simply asked, "How many more will come?" Ned said, "As many as it takes." She nodded. "Then we stop hiding." It was Illyrio who proposed the idea, half out of calculation, half out of curiosity. "If you mean to stop running, you need a sword arm, an army." A voice loud enough to drown the lies, and Essos had just the man. Or rather the people. The Dothraki Ned was furious. "You would give her to savages." Illyrio raised his hands. "Not give. Offer alliance. She weds the horse lord. They ride for her." "No. She'll be safe with them. She'll be sold with them." But Daenerys surprised them both. She said yes, not out of fear, out of choice. She stood before Ned that night, pale in the moonlight, and said, "I'm not a child anymore. You don't have to become queen to survive. But I want to live. And that means I need power." He hated it. Every word. But he saw Rhaegar in her. Not the warrior. The prince who read scrolls and listened to songs and tried just once to change the world. So they journeyed east. Daenerys, Viserys, Ned, and a small retinue funded by Illyrio. When they reached the great grass sea, it was as if the world had changed colors. Endless green sky that stretched forever, and a wind that spoke in whispers. Khal Drogo was a mountain of a man, silent, brutal, but curious. He watched Daenerys ride with Ned, saw how she looked him in the eye. Not as a slave, not as a pawn, but as a girl with purpose. The wedding was brutal and wild. Ned stayed at the edges, watching, always watching. Viserys grew louder with wine, boasted of dragons and vengeance. He approached Drogo with demands, waving his arms like a king, and Drogo ignored him, but he didn't ignore Daenerys. She didn't scream on their wedding night. She didn't run, and in the weeks that followed, she didn't bend. She learned their language, rode their horses, ate their food, and soon the whispers began, Khaleesi. Ned watched her transform, not into a queen of Westeros, but something older, something elemental. When Drogo finally spoke to Ned, it was brief. "You are not her blood. Why do you follow?" Ned said, "Because I failed her brother." Drogo nodded once. That was enough. But Viserys could not tolerate his sister's rise. His jealousy bloomed like rot. One night he tried to strike her in front of the Khalasar. He never touched her. Drogo's blood riders pinned him to the ground. Ned stepped in, demanded they spare him. Daenerys was the one who said no. "He will try again," she said, her voice cold. "He's not a dragon. He's a leech." Drogo melted gold in a pot. Viserys died screaming. Ned turned away, but not before he saw Daenerys's face. She didn't smile, but neither did she cry. The last tie to her past had been severed. She was alone now, except for him. After the funeral, she approached Ned by the fire. "You think I'm cruel?" He didn't answer. He would have killed me, she said. He would have dragged us all into fire. Still he said nothing. She touched his arm. You taught me how to live. But if I don't fight back, I'll die anyway, he met her eyes. There's a line. Once you cross it, there's no return. She looked at the flames. Then I'll burn carefully. The Dothraki began calling her blood of the dragon, but Ned knew better. She was becoming something more than dragon, more than wolf. She was becoming fire with a conscience, and that was dangerous for everyone. And that was dangerous for everyone. The Khalasar moved as a wave across the Dothraki sea, thousands of riders thundering across the horizon, and in their heart rode Daenerys Targaryen, not as a prisoner, not even as a queen. She rode like something they hadn't seen before, foreign and fearless, with silver hair streaming behind her and violet eyes that stared into the sun without blinking. Beside her rode Khal Drogo, his expression unreadable but his presence unmistakably drawn to hers. Behind them, silent but never out of reach, rode Ned Stark. He didn't wear northern furs anymore, not in the blistering heat. But he kept the sword. He always kept the sword. Every night he sat by the fire, half listening to the blood riders tell stories of burning villages and stolen brides. Every morning he watched Daenerys train. Not with swords anymore, she had learned that lesson, but with language, customs, and the brutal politics of survival. And yet she still came to him when the moon was high and the grass was still. They spoke in quiet tones while the rest of the camp snored. One night she said, I saw my father's throne in a dream, made of blades. It dripped with blood. Ned said nothing. She looked at him. Did he really burn them alive? The Starks? His jaw tightened. Yes, she looked down. Do you hate me for his crimes? No, he said. I remember who you are, not just where you come from. She nodded once, then turned her gaze back to the stars. I wonder if anyone else in Westeros would do the same. Ned didn't answer because he already knew. They wouldn't. The name Targaryen wasn't forgiven. It was feared. But then came the trader from Korth. He arrived dust-covered and trembling, claiming he had news. Gold bought his silence, but it was Daenerys who insisted he speak. A raven crossed the narrow sea, he said, voice hoarse, from King's Landing. A bounty's been placed. The Silver Queen, her wolf protector. The Khal if necessary. Ned clenched his fists. Daenerys stood. Who sent it? The Queen, he said. The new Queen, she frowned. Cersei? No, the man whispered. Not yet. But she moves in the shadows. The king grows weaker, fatter, drunker. Daenerys looked at Ned. If they fear me this much from across the sea, they'll never stop, Ned said. Not until you're dead. So she made her choice. The Khalasar veered west. There was protest at first. The Dothraki had no interest in wooden ships or salt water. But Drogo silenced them all with a single promise. The world will know her name, and they will fear her scream. It was madness, but it moved like wildfire. Daenerys was pregnant. She felt it first beneath the shade of a red-leafed tree, far from any healer or midwife. It wasn't just nausea or dreams, it was something deeper. A warmth inside her bones, a fire that didn't burn but pulsed with every breath. She told Ned before she told Drogo. He looked at her, and for the first time in years, he smiled. Not fully. Not with teeth. But enough. You will protect him, she asked. With my life, Ned said. Then came the ships. Stolen. Bought. Borrowed. Illyrio arranged it all. The docks of Korth filled with the sound of loading horses and armor and grain. The Khalasar, for the first time in history, prepared to cross the sea. But Drogo fell, a poisoned blade, a skirmish, a forgotten wound. Infection set in like a curse. Daenerys sat at his side night after night, feeding him broth, wiping sweat from his brow, whispering the old tongue. Ned begged her to let him go, but she wouldn't. She found a healer. Miri Mazdur.Ned recognized something dark behind the woman's eyes, but Daenerys wouldn't listen. She can save him, she said. She has to. But when the chanting began, when the blood spilled and the tent filled with screams that weren't Drogo's, Ned knew. It wasn't healing. It was sacrifice. He tried to pull her away. She shoved him back. Then it was done. Drogo lived, but he was gone. A breathing corpse, eyes blank, muscles limp. The stallion who mounted the world reduced to a whisper. Daenerys wept once, just once. Then she stood. I will burn it all, she said. And she did. She ordered a pyre built. Not just for Drogo, but for everything that tried to chain her to the past. The healer, the tent, the myths. Ned stood beside her as the flames rose. He didn't speak. He didn't move. Daenerys walked into the fire, and when it died, she stood unburnt. 3 dragonlings clung to her shoulders and arms. Weak, screeching, trembling but real. The Khalasar fell to their knees, and even Ned, for a moment, forgot how to breathe. She turned to him. "You once said home isn't always where you're born." He nodded. Barely able to speak, she said, "Westeros is my home, and I'm going to take it back." The weeks that followed were a frenzy. Armies flocked to her banner, not because of her name, but because of what they saw. A girl who survived fire, a girl with dragons. Ned watched her build something out of nothing. Alliances, trade routes, orders. She was no longer a student. She was becoming queen. But he also saw something else. The fire inside her. It flickered now with less warmth and more fury. One night he asked, "What happens if they don't kneel?" She looked at him, eyes distant. "Then they will burn." He stepped closer. "That's not you." "Maybe it is," she said. "Maybe you just never wanted to see it." He didn't sleep that night. A raven came from Westeros. Jon Arryn was dead. Cersei Lannister had seized power. Robert was dead, too, and Ned Stark was being hunted for treason, they claimed, for protecting the Dragon Queen, for abandoning the crown. His family was in danger. The North was in chaos. The war had already begun, and still Daenerys stood firm. "We leave at dawn," he stared at her. "You would fight a war now?" "I already am," he paused. "And what if I asked you not to?" She turned to him, eyes full of fire and something else. Betrayal. "Then I would ask if you ever believed in me at all." He didn't answer. Because deep down he didn't know anymore. Was he protecting her from the world, or protecting the world from her? The ships were loaded. The dragons circled. The wind blew west. Daenerys stood at the bow of the flagship, her silver hair whipping like a banner in the wind, and Ned Stark stood behind her, torn between loyalty, duty, and fear, not of her enemies, but of what she was becoming. Not of her enemies, but of what she was becoming. The narrow sea stretched endlessly before them, a churning grey mirror under a pale sky. The ship groaned as it cut through the waves, each splash and creak whispering of the coming war. Daenerys stood unmoving at the prow, her hands gripping the wood as if she could will Westeros to appear on the horizon. Her dragons circled above, still small but no longer helpless. Drogon had begun to test his wings with fury, already snapping at seagulls and flaring bursts of heat that singed the sails. Ned watched her in silence. He kept to the back of the deck, arms folded, every inch the Northman he was. Even after all these years in foreign lands, he said little now, not because he had nothing to say, but because he had said everything that could be said. Daenerys Targaryen was no longer a girl with questions. She had answers now. All of them sharp. They landed in the Stormlands. Far from the Lannister strongholds and out of reach of the Iron Throne's immediate grip, the Stormlands were fractured. Houses loyal to Robert Baratheon had splintered since his death. His brothers, Renly and Stannis, had begun to war with one another, each claiming to be king. Chaos reigned. Daenerys saw opportunity. She sent riders under false names, emissaries cloaked in shadows offering terms to the discontented, pledges of fire and blood for those who remained loyal to Robert's line. But for the bitter, the cast aside, the abandoned, she offered something more. A future. Ned met with Lord Estamont under the cover of night, in a ruined tower that still bore the black scars of Robert's rebellion. The old lord squinted through the torchlight, then blinked in disbelief. "Ned Stark," he rasped. "By the gods, I thought you were dead." "I might be," Ned said, voice low. "You're with her?" He nodded. "She's the dragon reborn. She's not her father." Estamont looked away. "That's not what people will believe." "I'm not asking them to believe it," Ned said. "I'm asking them to see it." They left with cautious support, enough to move troops but not enough to claim legitimacy. It didn't matter. Daenerys wasn't waiting for permission. Within 2 weeks her banner flew above 3 Stormland keeps. Her dragons lit funeral pyres for men who refused to yield. She made examples where she had to, but she spared those who bent the knee quickly. Some began calling her Stormfire, but word traveled fast. And it reached the Iron Throne quicker than expected. Cersei's wrath came on paper first, an open letter sent to every house, branding Daenerys a usurper, Ned a traitor. and anyone aiding them a target for execution. Gold cloaks were dispatched. Assassins followed. They didn't find Daenerys, but they found someone else. Maester Luwin, hanged outside Winterfell's gates. It was a message. When Ned read the report, his hands shook for the first time since Essos. Daenerys found him in the war tent, unmoving. The paper clutched so tight his knuckles turned white. "I told you they would never stop," she said. "I brought death to my family's door," he said quietly. "No," she said, stepping closer. "You tried to protect me, and now I'll protect them." She began planning the march north. Ned opposed it immediately. "It's too soon. We don't have the numbers." "We don't need numbers," she said. "We have fire. We have the name. You think the North will follow a Targaryen?" She turned. "They'll follow you." That cut deeper than any blade. He walked away that night alone. Into the woods beyond the camp. No guards, no sword. Just silence. He thought of Winterfell. Of Catelyn. Of Robb, who was probably a man now. Of Arya's wild spirit. Of Bran's quiet wisdom. Of Jon. Jon, the boy he'd lied to. The boy he'd called his own but never truly named. Would he hate him now? Would he understand? A branch snapped behind him. He turned. A hooded man stepped out from the shadows. "Lord Stark," the man said. "Or should I say exile of the crown?" Ned didn't reach for his blade. He simply stared. The man removed his hood. "Varys, you've traveled far," the spider said, "and left a storm in your wake." Ned narrowed his eyes. "Did Robert send you?" "Robert is rotting in his wine-soaked grave." "No, my lord, I come. On behalf of the realm." "The realm?" Ned spat. "Or the throne?" Varys gave a faint smile. "There is no throne without stability." "And stability. It's bleeding." He stepped closer. "The queen is reckless, but she is something else too. She inspires loyalty, fear, hope. She may be what this broken realm needs." Ned's voice was like stone. "Then why are you here?" "To warn you," Varys said. "Cersei has sent Sir Gregor. The mountain rides north." Ned's stomach dropped. Winterfell. He ran back to camp, breath burning in his lungs. Daenerys was already there, surrounded by maps, banners, and commanders. When he burst in, she turned instantly. "What is it?" "Cersei," he gasped. "She sent the mountain." Daenerys didn't speak. She ordered the march that night. They crossed the riverlands in 5 days. The dragons grew larger with every mile, feeding on cattle and terror. Drogon had learned to fly at night now, circling above the clouds like a shadow no one could fight. At Moat Cailin, they met their first resistance. Bolton men loyal to coin, not king. Daenerys offered them a chance. They spat at her boots. By morning their bodies burned beside the causeway. She didn't blink. Winterfell came into view under a sky filled with smoke. The north was not on fire, but it had been scarred. Villages razed. The flayed man banner of the Boltons raised over burned fields. Daenerys didn't ask for permission. She marched on the Dreadfort. It was not a battle. It was an execution. Ramsay Bolton screamed as Drogon tore his gate apart. She didn't spare his dogs. Ned stood in the courtyard as the last Bolton fell. He didn't lift his sword once. Daenerys walked past him, blood on her boots, eyes like embers. "They'll call this justice," she said. "And they'll be right." He looked at her for a long time. "This isn't who you were." She didn't stop walking. "It's who I had to become." That night the North bent the knee, not for her. Not for her dragons. For Ned Stark. Robb came to Winterfell within the week, flanked by bannermen and war-weary eyes. He didn't hug his father. He didn't smile. "You abandoned us," he said. Ned didn't deny it. "I did. I thought you were dead. I should have been." They stood in the Godswood, the old weirwood weeping red. The silence between them was heavier than war. Robb finally said, "She's not mad yet." "She's not. But she's close." "I know." Robb looked up. "Can we trust her?" Ned closed his eyes. "We have no choice." Outside the walls the snow began to fall, the dragons roared once more, and war loomed over Westeros like a storm with no sky left to darken. Like a storm with no sky left to darken. The wind carried the bite of winter now. The north had turned white in Daenerys' eyes. White skies, white fields, white breaths hissing from the mouths of soldiers waiting to die or conquer. Her dragons didn't fear the cold, but men did. Even those who followed her across oceans, even those who knelt when her fire scorched their enemies. Ned stood on the walls of Winterfell, cloaked in furs again after so many years. He'd once dreamed of returning, though never like this. Not with an army of Essos warriors camped outside the gates. Not with dragons circling above. Not with a girl beside him who now ruled like a storm waiting for something to break. Inside, Robb paced the great hall, the same hall where he was once declared king in the north. His voice was low but sharp, frustration threading through every word. She burns lords now. She threatens whole houses. You think they'll love her for that? They don't have to love her, Ned said. They just have to survive her. Robb slammed a hand on the long table. Then what do we become? What does the North become? A province of fear? A puppet kingdom? She brought peace where you had none. She brought fire, father. Ned didn't reply. He saw it too. The way Daenerys had changed. Her grace had grown sharp. Her justice swift. The girl who once wept under lemon trees was now a queen who no longer cried. Her tears were traded for iron, her kindness for strategy. Arya returned 2 days later, slipping into Winterfell like a shadow. She didn't greet them. She simply appeared in the godswood beside the weirwood tree where Ned sat alone. You should have stayed dead, she said. He turned, surprised. But she was older now, her voice more stone than snow. I couldn't, he said softly. She looked at him, her eyes not teary, not cold, just tired. Then you shouldn't have come back like this. Ned looked at her. I did what I thought was right. That's the same thing Cersei says. He couldn't deny it. Jon arrived with Ghost by his side, weary from the wall, grim with news. The White Walkers had stirred. The wildlings had fled. The dead had moved southward again, slowly, like a forgotten storm remembering its path. But Daenerys wasn't interested in snow wraiths or rumors. Not yet. Her eyes were still on the Iron Throne. Cersei Lannister had solidified her power in King's Landing. The banners of the Reach and Westerlands had bent beneath her crown of gold and lies. Tyrion had vanished. The Riverlands burned, and then there was Sansa. She rode into Winterfell with banners behind her, House Arryn, Vale Knights, and hundreds of loyalists who refused to follow dragons. She entered the hall not as a girl but as a lady. Ned rose to greet her. She did not bow. She did not smile. She did not cry. You gave our home to a conqueror, she said. I gave our home to someone who could protect it. From what? From whom? From the woman who would have called me sister if I'd been born across the sea. Ned stepped closer. She's not our enemy. Sansa's eyes narrowed. No, she's worse. Daenerys summoned her that night. They met in Ned's solar, Sansa, Arya, Robb, Jon, Daenerys, and Ned standing at the center of a storm. Daenerys spoke first. I did not come here to take the North. I came to save Westeros. Your brother believed in that, Robb scoffed. You saved nothing. You replaced one crown with another. Jon looked between them. If we fight each other, we lose. The dead don't care who wears what crown. Daenerys' eyes flicked to him, then back to Sansa. I'm not your enemy. I freed slaves. I broke chains. I bled for every step I took. You also burned lords, Sansa said, and threatened cities. You feed your dragons on fear. They are dragons, Daenerys said. They don't eat promises. The room grew cold. Arya broke the silence. She won't stop. Even if we kneel, she'll find something else to burn. Daenerys stared at her. And if I do, will you stab me in the dark? Arya didn't blink. If I have to. Ned stepped between them. Enough, he said. But it wasn't enough. Not anymore. That night, Daenerys called her war council. She would march south within the week. She would end Cersei. End the Lannisters. End the war. She gave the Starks their choice. Join her or get out of her way. Jon followed her to her chambers. He didn't know what he meant to say. He didn't even know if he was speaking to the same woman anymore. She sat near the fire, her dragons asleep on heated stones. You came to scold me too, she asked. I came to understand. She looked at him, eyes tired. Do you know what it's like to watch everything you love die and still be expected to smile? I know what it's like to fight for people who don't love you back. She stood. I am not the villain they need me to be, she said. I am the reckoning, Jon swallowed. And if your reckoning kills more than it saves. She stepped closer. Then you stop me, she said, but do it with fire. Or not at all. Ned watched her leave Winterfell with 20,000 soldiers and 3 dragons. He did not go with her, not yet. Instead, he sat in the Godswood and wrote letters. One to Robb, one to Catelyn, though he didn't know if she lived, one to Jon and one to Daenerys. He gave them all to a single raven. 3 days later, the message came from the south. King's Landing burned. Not fully. Not like the nightmare he had feared. But enough. The Red Keep's western wing destroyed. The great sept shattered. Tywin's. Bones dug from the tombs and scattered across the streets. The key. Mountain dead, finally, Cersei missing, thousands lost, and Daenerys, crowned by fire, standing alone on the Iron Throne, not smiling, but not crying either. They said she ordered the executions herself. They said she knelt in the ashes afterward. They said the bells never rang. But the people of King's Landing, for the first time in years, were quiet. That night, Varys reappeared at Ned's side in the snow-covered crypts of Winterfell. She did it, he said simply. Ned nodded. At what cost? Varys asked. Ned looked up. That's not a question I can answer anymore. And yet, the spider murmured, the realm will ask. The war was over. But the reckoning had just begun. The reckoning had just begun. Ash still hung in the air over King's Landing when Ned Stark arrived. He rode through the gates cloaked in grey and silence, his hood low, his eyes shadowed. The city was not screaming anymore, but it wasn't breathing either. The smell of smoke clung to the stones, soaked into the bones of buildings that still stood. Crows circled where bells once rang. People moved like ghosts, quiet, broken, watching from behind burned-out doorways and shattered windows. He had known war. He had smelled it on fields and in men. But this was different. This wasn't war. This was something else. This was aftermath. The Red Keep stood cracked but upright like a broken tooth jutting out of an old man's mouth. Half the banners were burned. The royal guards at the gates didn't move when he passed. Some didn't even look. They recognized him. Or maybe they didn't, it didn't matter. The Queen had won. Daenerys waited in the throne room. The Iron Throne was scorched, twisted, less a seat, more a monument of survival, melted at its edges, reshaped by dragon fire and fury, and in front of it stood the girl he once met under lemon trees. Only she wasn't a girl anymore, she wore no crown, no armor. Her dress was black and red. Her hair pulled tight, her eyes darker than they'd ever been. She looked at him and didn't smile, he didn't bow. They stood in silence for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm. "It's done," Ned nodded. "Yes, I offered surrender. I know." They refused. He nodded again. "They would have killed me." He stepped forward. "And what are you now, Daenerys?" Her jaw tightened. "I'm queen. I didn't ask your title." She turned from him, walking slowly toward the throne. "I gave them a better world," she said. "No tyrants, no chains, no more Lannisters. And no city," Ned said quietly. "They'll rebuild. Will they forget?" She turned back sharply. "Would you have done differently?" "I did. And what did it cost you?" she asked. "Your home. Your children's safety. The life you could have had. I made my choice. So did I." They stared at each other, neither one breaking, neither one yielding. He walked to the center of the hall, stood at the spot where so many kings had bled, and said the words he'd been carrying since he left Winterfell. "I loved the girl who whispered she didn't want to be queen. I followed the woman who dreamed of freedom. But this—" He looked around at the scorched pillars. "This is not freedom," her voice dropped. "So you don't get to say that. You don't get to come here and judge me. Not after everything I gave. Everything I lost. You didn't lose yourself, Daenerys. You gave yourself away." She stepped closer. "Would you have rather I died quietly? Married off in Essos? Another name forgotten in a merchant's ledger. I would have rather you remembered who you were." Her voice cracked then. "Just barely. You taught me how to survive." "I did what you taught me." "No," he said. "I taught you how to live." She shook her head. "It's too late for that." They stood in the Hall of Kings, surrounded by fire's memory, both of them drowning in it. That night, Ned was summoned again, not by Daenerys but by Tyrion Lannister. He was thinner now, greyer, a shadow of the clever man who once drank and talked his way out of war. They met in the dungeons beneath the Red Keep, where shadows hung thicker than dust. "She let you in," Tyrion said. "She must still trust you. I'm not sure trust matters anymore." Tyrion chuckled, bitter and sharp. "You're not wrong. She says I betrayed her, says I fed her enemies with doubt. But all I did was ask questions. You always did." She didn't like the answers. Ned looked through the bars. What do you want from me? A choice, Tyrion said. Before there's no one left to make one. I've made mine. No, you haven't. You've postponed it. Hidden behind loyalty, honor, family. You've spent your whole life trying not to choose between love and duty. He leaned closer to the bars. But you'll have to now. Ned left without another word. But the next morning Jon arrived. His face was drawn. His cloak singed from battles in the Reach. He had fought his way to the gates with northern bannermen and allies from the Vale. The men of Westeros had begun to rally, not under Daenerys, but beside her. Not because they wanted a queen, because they feared what came next. He found Ned at the wall. She's not listening, Jon said. She's done. The war is over, but she's still fighting. I know. She'll kill again. I know. Jon looked at him. What do we do? And Ned Stark, who had always avoided the game, finally gave his answer. You take the throne. Jon laughed almost. I'm no king. You are. And you always were. And then he told him about Lyanna, about Rhaegar, about Jon's birth. His name, Aegon. The truth fell like a blade between them. Jon didn't speak for a long time. When he did, his voice was broken. Why would you lie to me? To protect you. To give you a life. A choice. Then why take it away now? Because Daenerys already made hers. That night the dragons screamed. No one saw Jon enter the throne room. Not even the guards. They turned their backs when he passed. Or maybe they closed their eyes. Daenerys stood alone again, staring at the throne, one hand on the cold steel. He stepped behind her, quiet. She turned. Surprised but not afraid, he held her eyes. I loved you, he said. I still do, she whispered. But you're not who you were. She stepped closer. I am exactly who I have to be. I know. And then he kissed her, soft, long, the last kiss of a love that could never survive. And when he pulled away, he drove the blade into her chest. She didn't scream, she didn't speak, she just looked at him, and then fell. Drogon's scream tore the sky in half. The dragon landed beside her body, nostrils flaring, heat cracking the stones. He roared at Jon but did not burn him. Instead, he melted the throne. Steel turned to slag. Centuries of conquest turned to liquid. And then Drogon took her body in his claws, lifted her into the sky and vanished. When the dust settled, Ned stood in the throne room again, this time beside Jon. The lords of Westeros arrived days. Later, Sansa, Robb, Arya, Brienne, Davos, Sam, Gendry, Yara, others, and they looked to the broken hall and waited for a king or queen to rise. Jon refused. So Ned stepped forward, and in a voice that carried through the ruined stone and memory, he said, The war is over. The throne is gone. Let Westeros choose its future. It wasn't a crown that was given. It was a council, a vote, and Bran Stark was chosen. The boy who saw everything. Jon was exiled to the wall. Again. But this time, he rode north willingly. Robb ruled the north. Independent, Sansa stood beside him. Arya sailed west, chasing something beyond maps, and Ned Stark returned to Winterfell. Older, quieter. He tended the trees now, planted lemon groves in the courtyard, in memory. He never saw Drogon again. But sometimes, when the wind blew from the east, he thought he could smell smoke. And sometimes when the snow melted just right, he thought he could hear her voice, not a queen, just a girl, asking if she would ever be free. Asking if she would ever be free.